But now let's hear from John Kotter, chairman of Kotter, Inc., Professor Emeritus of Business and Leadership at the Harvard Business School and a multiple New York Times bestseller on change. But John is not just about large-scale change, although he's done a lot of that. John's been a leading management thinker on change for over 30 years, and trying to stay relevant in that field for that long is just an extraordinary accomplishment. He's considered the premier voice on leadership and change, and as importantly, he understands what a successful business transformation looks like. His key premise over the years has been most organizational change initiatives fail spectacularly and at worst, and they get lukewarm results at best. So our conversation today will be about how to think about the notion of increased, rapid, and complex change in your business as we forge ahead to the new normal. John, welcome to the Atlanta Rotary Club. Thanks for beaming in from Boston.
Thank you, Bill. It's a pleasure.
Well, we're looking forward to your insight, and I know everybody's chomping at the bit to hear what you have to say. So as Chris Cuomo says, let's get after it. So go ahead.
I was going to say, I can't remember the last time I have ever said at the beginning of a short talk that the biggest insight I could offer you right now is to let the previous speaker and what he said reverberate around in your brain for the next few weeks. Bill said so much that is so relevant beyond mergers and acquisitions, that's relevant to winning and serving society today in this rapidly changing world.
So I always agree, and I love to hear Bill. But let's just say, John, you heard what he had to say, and you heard where he is. As you look around the corner for Truist, what would you tell him to include in the things that he's got to worry and pay attention to right now, as he's in this stage of his change process?
Well, I would say to Bill and to virtually everyone I assume who is listening and watching right now, that obviously we're going to go through a significant change sometime in the next 6 months as COVID wraps down, and we have to make some decisions. This is usually talked about as going back to work. Nobody should go back to work. People should go back to work better. Or in other words, this is an opportunity to take habits that you had a year ago that got kind of set aside by necessity, by the COVID environment, and to kill them off, not bring them back. It's also an opportunity to take some new ways of working and places of working and ideas that emerged in the last year, and not go back to the old way, but to embrace them even tighter and make them a part of your ongoing operations. And it's an opportunity to practice what everybody is going to have to get better at, which is dealing with a faster moving world. The data on this is overwhelming. The world's been speeding up for centuries, but the last 30 years, the last 20 years, the last 5 years, and then this spike in a sense last spring over 2 or 4 weeks. This is not going to go away. It's not. I listen and I read every day articles, or I hear something on TV or the radio or podcasts that makes it sound like we're going to now settle back into a new normal that's kind of like the old normal, and it's has less things surprising happening. This is not what the data says. What changes are going to come at us is unclear, but it's overwhelmingly clear that we're going to face more change, faster change, more volatile change, more uncertainty that comes with that. And yet our institutions are not built necessarily to deal with rapid change. they lean, as does human nature, toward survival,
So
dealing with immediate threats and not thriving by grabbing opportunity.
So I get that for big companies and maybe for technology companies, hyper competitive consumer products companies, but what about regulated, slower growth? So we have, in the audience is Steve Hennessy, has a family car dealership with multiple brands. We've got David Rubinger, who publisher of the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Thad Warren, who's got a family environmental engineering company. And we've even got Michelle Nunn from the iconic Care USA. What do you tell those people in those kind of industries? I mean, rapid change is coming, but how much is it going to affect them?
It's going to affect them more than most people believe. And the challenge is, if you've been in a slower moving environment, obviously, you haven't developed some of the muscle strength, some of the capabilities, the qualities, the skills you need to deal with a faster moving world. And it's not like you can develop those overnight. So the best time for all of the people you just mentioned to start developing their change muscle is before they're going to, for competitive reasons, absolutely need it, which is to say now.
So I get it. There's no overwhelming evidence that we're going to a new normal. And, we also hear that the internet is here to stay. We believe that. But depending on who you read, the new normal looks somewhere between Armageddon and this too shall pass. So how should executives balance between those essential tasks of management and the moral imperative of leadership? Because there's a balance there. It's not all or one, all or nothing.
Right. And I think I would refer back to a lot of what Bill said 10 or 15 minutes ago. I mean, I just made a few notes here. I'm looking down at them. Purpose. If there's not clarity of what your purpose of your enterprise is and what the vision is and what the biggest opportunity is, and if that is not embraced, not just intellectually, but emotionally in the heart by most of your people, work on it, because it will pay off hugely when things start speeding up. Thinking in terms of one, organizations break things down into silos, as we all know. And under slower moving conditions, you can have communication go up and down silos, and everything, if there are competent people, will work out okay. When things speed up, that doesn't work. You've got to be much more of a one organization, one team, and that requires one culture, none of which just happens naturally. You have to be intentional about it. And leadership is very much, if management's about plans and budgets and organizational hierarchies and control systems and metrics, all of which are essential, obviously, to run something of any scale at all, leadership is very much about purpose and opportunity and culture and alignment. That's the one piece, getting us all on the same team. I love what Bill had to say about talent. There's so much written these days about the war on talent. I know so many companies that have a lot more talent than they recognize. They look for conventional measures of who the high potentials are and think it has to be a limited set of people. The leaders I know who are thriving these days see that there's a lot of talent in their organizations, and it's their jobs to draw it out, get out of the way, make sure they're aligned around purpose, and allowing them to be proactive and provide leadership. Because the way you get tailwind in a rapidly moving world is it's a lot more than the executive committee. It's a lot of people at multiple levels and across offices or departments or divisions who actually, because they have a sense of urgency, because they see the opportunity, because there is a sense of real meaningful purpose that is in their hearts, they step up above and beyond the call of duty and do wonderful things for you. Even if change is scaring other people, they see it as an opportunity. They overcome their own fears and they make something sometimes extraordinary happen. The high side of the possibilities in the future is much higher than most people recognize. It's so easy to see the threats, and we're programmed to see threats. I mean, that's how we've survived all these years. 99% of all forms of life have died out over the many centuries. We haven't, partly because we have a very strong survival system. But that system alone is not what helps create organizations that are able to move quickly, adapt quickly, be agile, take advantage of opportunities, and do extraordinary things. It's the thrive part of our nature, which is also built in, although not as strong. And leadership, in a sense, activates thrive, and activating it from more people to provide you with that tailwind. The stories I could tell, and we don't have the time, about people doing things that they thought were simply nice but impossible. I could talk all afternoon, and we're going to hear more of those stories in the future.
Right. You know, and it's a democratization of leadership, and your concept of leadership from everywhere. And it's been said that innovation comes out of chaos through people with shared values. And you may have said that. I don't remember where I picked that up. I'll attribute it to you at this point. When I was doing merger integration work, we used to, when we were trying to get our clients up to think differently, we say, okay, it's time to play some pickup basketball as opposed to SEC football. So, because part of the problem is we weren't sure what success looked like and how far we were going to get to that success down the path that we were in. But what came out of that was there were some people, it struck fear into their very soul that of this democratization of leadership and people leading from everywhere. And for others, it became a rallying cry against the hierarchy. And on both sides, there was both very good behavior and very bad behavior that got created depending on who was worried about what. Where have you seen people get this balance right? I mean, that's all part of that chaos process.
Sure. But one of the things that can help enormously, and we see this all the time, is systematically and very intentionally making sure that you get some short-term results that prove that you can be better by changing, and by changing in a positive sense, and results that don't lead to people's worst fears, but actually show that the future can be better. And broadcasting those results and celebrating what it does is it draws people from all directions toward the center, if you will, an intelligent center for a changing world. They take more actions, produce more results, more celebration, and you end up with a kind of an aligned, if you will, volunteer army that does more than their day jobs, that actually comes up with innovative ways to take advantage of opportunities, even if you at the top can't quite clearly see what the opportunities are. So better results systematically produced by sometimes unknown characters in your organization. They're not on the high potential list because you allow them, give them some rope within boundaries, is an important part of pulling people together and getting momentum and avoiding some of the problems you're talking about, Bill.
So have you seen, I mean, could you help us with some, more concrete examples of where you've seen folks, companies keep their folks energized? And it's about purpose, and it's about, the head, the heart, and then the hands come come last. But give us some examples of companies you see do it well, and what the catalyst is.
Well, it comes down in the final analysis to leadership again. Leadership is about mobilizing people to achieve more, regardless of the barriers and hardships and everything else. I was just thinking, as you were asking that question, what would be an example of one of the more difficult situations I've watched in the last few years? And talk about complexity. We worked with a professional association a few years ago. So they've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of members. It's a professional association. So a lot of the incentives and the structures and the like that a regular business have, they don't have. And they had been trying for something like 15 years to change their governance structure so that they could get on with a whole variety of programs to help the profession, to help their members keep up and with a changing profession. And the bureaucracy at its worst, people at their most hesitant had stopped president after president from achieving this. And in a period of less than 1 year, a new president with some coaching started talking about this in a way that was less threatening and was more exciting. Thought of it as, this isn't my job. This is going to have to be the job of a larger and larger coalition of people who really believe deep in their hearts that this is the right thing to do. And the level of communication on this went up by a factor of 10 easily. The communication that wasn't just head communication, but heart communication went up by a factor of 10. They did a few small things to produce what I call wins, so they got credibility that this wasn't just a crazy idea being pursued by the latest president. And as a result, they voted overwhelmingly to change the governance structure, which allowed them to pursue a number of strategic initiatives, which in the past 5 years, to my knowledge, has helped that group, that association, a very complex organization, now serve its mission infinitely better. The same sort of thing is needed across corporate and global sites.
One of the biggest tools that seems to get used when it's used successfully is the bully pulpit, and that's the changing of the message and the consistent message, handing it down to the various levels, so everybody's singing out of the same hymnal, if you'll pardon that expression, or reading from the same bullet points. But the issue is always, how do you operationalize the change as opposed to have it be anecdotal? And so the operationalization of change requires an organization to believe in failure to a certain extent. So have you seen people use failure effectively?
Of course. If somebody is trying to act in new ways, innovative ways, to deal with real opportunities in a changing environment, and they don't succeed, again, there have to be handrails around to, obviously, to mitigate real risk, but simply by not shooting people that fail, by pointing out what they were trying to do and why that was important, and that why we need to work harder to find ways of serving those goals, serving those ends, that get it right this time. That'll make all the difference in the world. The fear of failure tends to be a function of when people perceive that there are, dead bodies all over the floor. Each one marked by, he failed on this, he failed on that. That's a great way to kill innovation.
Well, there was a lot of that earlier in my career. People getting dragged out back and shot, or these taken behind the woodshed was a regular phrase that people would use. So if you take that the next step, there's a difference between public companies and generational transfers. The change in generational transfer, you have to have a bit of failure in there for the new generation to take over. Any thoughts on the difference in generational change versus corporate change?
No, it's much the same. Change is change. At a high enough level of abstraction, the fundamental principles are the same. I will say one thing about, since you brought it up, Bill, about generations. There's a lot of negative press about millennials. They're self-centered. They're lazy. They think they deserve too much too fast,
And need a trophy.
et cetera. Oh yeah. Well, they grew up getting a trophy every 4 days.
Right.
So. But one of the things I've recognized is that in this world, the sources that give people a sense of meaning, which all human beings need, have in many places been going down for decades now. And these kids can respond very, very well to purpose, opportunity that meets their own needs for doing something meaningful. You hook into that, and all of a sudden, this lazy, entitled person is coming up with new ideas, working late at night or at home, and surprising you. I think you can mobilize millennials as a source of talent. But again, it requires leadership, not just good management.
Well, in the senior ranks, the democratization of leadership is clearly a turning from each other to the rest of the organization. And we used to have a presentation that said how to jumpstart a flat organization. And it was all about moving down in the organization, the conversations you had. But what about the other direction? What about the shareholders? There's a shareholder capitalism piece that says, whoa, wait a minute, I'm happy your people are happy, but I really want you to put more money in my pocket. And your shareholders are really the number one stakeholder.
If the greatest business leaders that I have studied over my career have all shared the characteristic of not just thinking in a hierarchical sense, that they are looking down to their people that report to them, and it's their job to somehow motivate and communicate to them. They think in more network terms, and part of that network, an essential part, are, of course, stockholders, shareholders,
right,
as well as customers, as well as in some industries, suppliers, as well as in some industries, the communities in which they operate. And they go out of their way to talk to all of those groups or get others within their organizations to also talk to those groups, so that you have an ongoing dialogue that begins to align the various groups around some sense of the opportunities. You get more cooperation, you get fewer fights, and a higher probability of great success.
No. The Economist just came out with an article that posted that average CEO pay had now achieved 320 times the average of the regular employee pay. So if you were going to suggest to Truist or whoever else about their change aspirations, how do you build an incentive system to support it? What would you recommend?
Well, the ultimate incentive that people respond to that makes them work above and beyond the call of duty is that they deeply believe that they're doing something that that's important and meaningful. There are a subsection of society that responds very strongly to economic rewards, but the average human being responds even more strongly to to meaningful purpose. I mean, Bill really got that right. And so my question, or my response to your question, is don't try to buy people. Money has to be seen as handled in a reasonable or fair way, or you run the risk of an insurrection. But throwing money at people as a way to motivate them to take on society's challenges, to take on the technological, the social, all the changes that are happening these days, that's not the solution.
And neither is working more hours, I guess.
No, nobody won a war by dying. I mean,
and the millennials may have that right. They look at it as, I don't need to work near as hard as you did. And to me, that's one of the big generational ahas between me and my sons is they look at me and they go, I'll work hard, but not like you guys worked, which is different. That's kind of a different way to think about it. So, so one question for you. So in the last year, what's the biggest difference in the way you work? I know you do a lot of research and a lot of writing and a lot of talking on the phone anyway, but how have you changed?
We started using Zoom and Slack and all of the various long distance tools 3 or 4 years ago when they first came out. So our transition was much less abrupt. But in the advisory business that I'm an executive chairman for, of the company that's named after me, that was like traditional consulting, a face-to-face business. Our people flew to their clients and stood in the same room and did things. And I joined them on a regular basis. And in a period of 6 to 8 weeks, a empowered, excited group of people who got over their own fears of what this would mean and began to see that there was some opportunity here, reinvented how they did consulting and reinvented it in a virtual world. And I did too. Whereas I was doing things at the coffee break and within 10 feet or 50 feet of individuals, I had to adjust to doing things virtually like this. And at first it was awkward, and then you kind of get into it, and then you start raising the question of, okay, we've solved the short-term problem, but where is there an opportunity here to go beyond what we did before, to do it even better?
Right.
Combination of technologies, face-to-face, et cetera. That's a way it's got to be thinking. And a change, you got to say, we take advantage of logical changes, do things to be stronger and society more.
That's terrific. And Rick Western is your CEO at Kotter, and he's an old Atlanta guy. I've found out. And so we're headed to the top of the hour, and I think Cannon might be having some technical difficulty. But there's Cannon.
Well, I think I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. I was
great. Dr. Kotter, awesome insights as expected. So, but thank you. And there were one or two other questions, if you don't mind, and you touched on it just kind of at the end there. But you talked about how we're all going back to work, but don't go back to work. Go back to work better. And I'm sure that's situational by company, by industry, like you kind of alluded to with consulting. But I'm just wondering, is there one habit you would like to see killed, or you think that corporations should kill as we return, using this as an opportunity? And is there one habit that we've learned that we should continue to do more of?
Well, because it will, as you point out, vary from industry to industry, probably. The habit I would suggest is that you start right now putting together teams of people and charging them with the task of saying, what did we used to do that we're no longer doing during the pandemic that, God bless, it's better now, and we don't want to change back. And put together groups of people with what have we started doing during the last year that we've never done before, that we can't allow bureaucracy and tradition and culture creep in and force back into the system. And if you do that well, you will get ideas, and not only ideas, you'll get a basis, if you involve enough people, of support to help execute those ideas, because you'll have a whole team of people who will be out being your salesman, so to speak.
A wonderful answer. I think you have about 180 people in this call who are probably going to do just that with your excellent advice. I think, no leader has the answer in and of themselves. In fact, they probably have the wrong answer. So tapping teams to do that, just wonderful insight. One other just kind of follow-up question. I mean, you made the great point about building your change muscle, and so important to do that. The question is, how do you do that? What's the best way to do that? And is there the right way how do you incentivize building a change muscle?
Well, it starts with creating a sense of urgency around, we need to build a change muscle. I mean, it's like all change. It's very easy to be complacent, or when things are in chaos, as they have been at the beginning of this pandemic and at various times, to go the other way into panic. Complacency and panic don't help you at all. But a real sense of urgency that the world is changing. This is not necessarily bad. This could be great for us, for me, for my family, for my colleagues. I'm going to get up every day and come into work and find some way to do something to kind of nudge things in the right direction. Getting that going around the whole issue of change itself and change muscle itself is a good starting place.
Well, wonderful answer. And just thank you so much for your thoughts and your time today. Bill, I'll let you wrap it up for us if you'd like.
I don't have any announcements. I'm just going to say, John, thank you very much for your time and insight as always. Love to have more conversations with you as we all evolve.
Absolutely. Great conversation. And Dr. Kotter, thank you for your thought leadership today.
My pleasure, really.